Welcome to ENside Politics, our weekly podcast on a few things you need to know about San Antonio politics. I'm Greg Jefferson, politics editor of the San Antonio Express News. I'm joined today by City Hall reporter Molly Smith.
Hello.
And a repeat guest, an oft-had guest to our podcast, campaign consultant and sometimes City Hall council aide, Andrew Solano. Andrew, welcome back.
Yeah,
how's it going?
To be here. I'm excited to be here today, I think.
Well, we'll see. So we were supposed to have Ron Nirenberg sitting in that.
I'm not Ron.
You are not here as a Ron Nirenberg proxy.
I am not. I'm not working on either of these campaigns.
Right. Mm-hmm. That being his or Peter Sakai for the county judges.
Correct.
So late last week, we heard from Nirenberg's campaign that it was my memory is fuzzy. It was either he had an totally unsolvable scheduling conflict,
okay,
or he wanted to spend more time with the family. And I think either one was as legitimate as the other. But either way, he is not here. But he was mayor of San Antonio for 8 years. And I think, he's got quite a record we can talk about. Mm-hmm. As he could be on the cusp of winning the Democratic nomination for Bexar County Judge. He might not. Mm-hmm. We'll see in about 8 days. Yeah. But let's talk about his record. He has made a big part of his campaign against Peter Sakai, kind of an attack about his reactionism. Like he has accused Sakai of being too passive as a county judge, too judicial in his manner, and reacting to events rather than getting ahead of them. So given that that's kind of his main point of attack, how dynamic a mayor was Ron Nirenberg? And give me a couple of examples.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's interesting. You guys have covered this. Both the county judge and mayor's seat in San Antonio are different than like what most people would consider around the country, right? I mean, especially with the mayor being in a strong manager form of government. And so it's interesting, right? Because it's kind of like, two of the same. And so I think for me, being dynamic in the mayor's office is all about, being able to count to six, as we always say, and trying to figure out and leverage where your council colleagues are. So I say that to couch that. Ron came in and it was like immediately COVID. For all things considered. I mean,
not really. Because so he defeated Ivy Taylor in 2017.
Yes.
I struggle to remember much about his first term at all. I just don't remember.
Yeah, I mean,
anything so the Confederate statue got removed from Nirenberg. We know that.
So I guess that's my point, right? Being reactionary is part of the job, right? Like you never know what you're going to get when you wake up that morning as the elected or the staff or city staff, and so a lot of that stuff is happening. Even when I was in Ivy's office, a lot of the work that you try to do, that's part of it. You try to get as much and be prepared as much as you can on your campaign promises, knowing that anything can happen. That when we were in office with Ivy, you started to really see a lot of those shootings around the country, right? And a lot of the protest around it. Mike Brown, and then of course George Floyd and others later on, but that's when that really started. And so I just say that because yes, there was a term or so there, but from my recollection, I was there at the time when I came back to work for Ana Sandoval as her chief for COVID. Everything had shifted, right? For essentially that entire term. And so I think that's...
No, you're talking about with COVID.
Yeah.
The second term.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. And so I think that is kind of where everything goes from there in terms of, budgeting, and you get all the funds and of course, SA Ready to Work. So when you ask me how dynamic or, consequential, I think that you can't ignore that piece of it because it really defines his time as mayor.
Yeah. And that totally makes sense in that his big signature program is Ready to Work. And that was born like that. Correct. That I seriously doubt that, that would be a thing had it not been for the pandemic. Yeah. Now, you were in City Hall at the time. What kind of described the atmosphere out of which Ready to Work was born? And Like, how hands-on was Ron Nirenberg, as far as you could tell, really? Because often, it'll be in staff's hands, city staff, they'll develop something, and then the elected official will come along and take credit for it. Is that what happened here?
No, I don't think so. I mean, my recollection, again, I was chief of staff for Councilwoman Sandoval at the time. And I remember, we really were trying to, one, get our arms around the pandemic, right? And I think first and foremost was around getting folks, testing when that eventually happened, and then of course the vaccines. And so in the midst of all that, like we saw what was going to happen with jobs, right? We were getting the calls. We went out door knocking. We would hear from people who were struggling, and it was just chaos. I mean, no one seemed to be prepared really on like what was going to happen at the ground. And so like for us being at the local level, trying to work together, I recall, directly working with the mayor and his staff and the council members. Everything was remote. So I remember the Zoom calls we were having for chief of staff meetings with Ron and his team, and all the way up to the votes. I mean, there was some real questions like, who were we going to be serving? I remember one, especially this one time around the study coming out and saying who was most impacted, and it was young moms without a high school degree.
This is one of the studies like post. A couple years.
No, this was before Ready to Work. Like who were we going to try to, like, who was going to be in the program? That was around the Project Quest part of it. And so, there was questions around like, okay, if those were the people, these young moms without a college degree, single moms, and ultimately like they weren't able to be included in the program, right, until later. And so like those are the questions I just remember having with the council members and the mayor as that was, being discussed.
Had the pandemic not happened, what do you think one of his signature programs would be? Because for him, I think very much Ready to Work is a signature program, which arose from the pandemic. I think it's debatable how successful Ready to Work has been, but I'm curious kind of watching him, had the pandemic not happened, where you think he would have kind of like made his mark.
Yeah. I mean, the ones that come to mind, of course, are like transportation. He came in terms of the campaign, wanting to push that, and housing, obviously. I think those are two things that he's achieved to some degree.
How so?
I mean,
with transportation.
Transportation, I know, it looked a little different, but ultimately like folding that into what became, going after federal funds and getting the Green Line and Silver Line. I mean, I just know that those were priorities. Again, you come in, obviously I was Bethel's campaign manager, and we had an entire platform. And so you look at things and try to see like in that snapshot in time. Again, no one could have predicted, that federal funds were going to be, going towards other initiatives. And in this case, the jobs piece with SA Ready to Work. But I mean, transportation, housing are two notable ones.
So are you talking about taking sales tax and using part of it for Ready to Work, but also after a few years,
it was 3 years,
channeling it to via Metropolitan Transit. Now, to do that though, he had to take it away from
which was controversial
for protection. In retrospect, just looking, I think it's hard for a lot of people who supported, buying easements over the Edwards Aquifer to keep it out of developers' hands. Yeah. I think it's hard for them to look at Ready to Work and say, you know what, that was a good trade. I think that worked out really well for us. What do you think? Was it still today the smart move to have made?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's tough. I mean, because you look at it through these lens of timelines, right? We all knew, I think, going in that the Ready to Work piece of this was going to take time, right? And I really think what I'll say to listeners and viewers, I mean, I think in all of this is managing expectations. And I think if anything—
You sound like Gina Ortiz Jones.
Molly.
That too sounded
yeah.
Well, Molly.
But listen, it really is true. I mean, I think where Ron and other city staff, I mean, certainly all of us could have done a better job was to manage those expectations. And you see that with the numbers you've reported on. It was like 17,000 jobs. I mean, just being honest up front and saying, look, this is where we think we can achieve this, and these are going to be meaningful, but this is the one of a kind. No one's ever done this before. But I think we were quick to jump out and say, like, this is how many people are going to be impacted. And of course, when those don't happen and you start moving the goal back, right, it's problematic.
Yeah.
Where are they at now?
I think it was originally they said 40,000. This was a number city staff put out. Ended up being wildly overblown. They then walked that back. Now their goal is to get 28,000 people enrolled by the time they spend down all this money. They're at a little over 15,000. So they a little over halfway there, but still a long way to go. And I think one thing that they've kind of struggled with is meeting these city-imposed metrics. And I think Ron has, a challenge of explaining that and has a hard time kind of explaining to folks kind of why they're struggling so much, and oftentimes gets to over-explaining. And I mean, you've said this before, it's like, if you're having to do that much explaining,
You're losing. Yeah.
Now, okay, so going back to transportation for a moment. So part of what he did to improve mass transit in San Antonio is give VIA more money, right? So you'd also mentioned federal funding for the green and silver lines. I mean, what does that mean? Just a trip to DC? Like, did he actually really work the phones and get them the money?
I mean, look, I think to be fair, I mean, that's just part of the job, right? And you need to go do that. I mean, we've seen Mayor Jones prioritizing that, obviously, with cuts and the missions here. So, I mean, you can't discount that piece of it. I mean, everyone is fighting. I've been on the congressional side working for Congressman Doggett, and I know how hard it is, and everyone's trying to get those funds. So, you do have to put the packages together. I think at the time, his relationship with Secretary Buttigieg, right, played a role into that. My understanding was they were pretty close. And so that all that stuff helps, but it's back to relationships, right? And being able to get people together and leverage, what elected officials, whether it's the state, federal, or local, and get them all on the same page. That's not easy.
Yeah.
How do you think Ron did at that? Because I think one of the kind of questions as this debate in this race is Judge Sakai will say, my strength is convening folks. And then Ron will say, Judge Sakai hasn't been doing that great of a job and this is too reactionary. And I'm curious kind of how you look at the relationships Ron was able to build and kind of where his strengths or weaknesses were with that.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a high bar if you look at someone like Mayor Hardberger, where I was on council during that time early in my career back in 06, 07. And, I know at this point, ad nauseum, we've talked about, and it's true that Mayor Hardberger would go and sit individually with council members. I was with Councilman Ray Lopez at the time. And I remember that. I'd come into the office and Phil was sitting there with him. And so that's kind of what I came in on. Julian was similar. They had council liaisons. My good friend, our good friend Jed Mabius, who at the time was with Phil, then transitioned to Julian as a council liaison. I had that position under Ivy Taylor's administration. And my job, quite frankly, when people say, well, what is a council liaison? My job was literally just to make sure that council members knew what was going on before it hit the papers. Yeah. It was really that simple. I will say that Ron didn't have that necessarily. He relied on his chiefs of staff, and they did a good job, but it just wasn't the same. If we're being honest, and I think everyone's built a little different. But
for a lot of Ron Nirenberg's time as mayor, there was a lot of scuttlebutt about he just didn't really didn't really connect with council members. I mean, kind of at large. Yeah. I'm sure there were individual council members he got along swimmingly with. Is that fair? Like, was he kind of remote from city council members? And if so, is it similar at all to what we're seeing now with the current mayor, Gina Ortiz Jones?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's on a spectrum. And I think, I remember times when Julian was infamous, he would go and get his teas from Bill Miller's when there was still one by downtown and, try to shake the detail and get some time alone. Right. And that was understandable. Again, Ivy, definitely wasn't known for the politicking piece, right? She felt most comfortable behind the scenes. She was a former city staffer, really smart around urban planning, obviously. And so, there were times struggle to say hey, we got this as a staff. You need to go outside and shake hands and kiss babies, right? That's part of the job. And some people excel at that better than others. But that just wasn't her, right?
Yeah.
There are some electeds who feel more comfortable at the table trying to get the work done. they're both meaningful, but like if you want to be the politician, like that's the Bill Clinton part of this, or that's like when I worked for Lloyd Doggett, he'd show up at a quinceañera or a barbecue. Like there's just a different piece of how that works. I don't see that as much in any of the elected officials as they come through. But I will say, like for Ron, that wasn't necessarily his forte. Ron had come from like his background being more academic, and even when he was a councilman in District 8, when I was working alongside his office, that's where I saw him excelling, right? And that's okay. They're just different types. I mean, you get elected either way, and now the job is yours to go figure out. And so I think he did a good job of balancing that.
Yeah. So you also mentioned affordable housing. What did he do kind of in that realm that was really noteworthy?
Pushing for the housing bond, I think. I mean, again, going back to Ivy, like we had kind of a working with the state at the time, because I think there was a constitutional change that was necessary. But like it was just really an example of what we were trying to do. And ultimately they took that and put that forward into the housing bond. And I know that it's worked well. They're looking at the phase 2 of that. But I think certainly housing was a big piece of it. He had the housing task force that he put together. So Did his support for affordable housing, or the perception of it, or did that get hurt at all with the baseball stadium, the Missions baseball stadium? Which is, I mean, that deal is going to result in the raising of the soap factory apartments, which is one of the least expensive housing options downtown, and it's going to be gone. Yeah, no, I mean, the deal he supported. Yeah, I mean that one to me was glaring because it was the city's own policy. Right, that didn't seem to be followed, and you can like try to figure in parts here.
Which was we're not going to do anything development wise. I mean, in terms of offering incentives that will destroy affordable housing.
And then their very technical argument is that the stadium itself will not be on the property,
right?
But it's still the new development on the kind of soap factory land is going to be used to finance it. So it's a very kind of technical
prime example if you're explaining you're losing.
But
so no, and I mean if you recall too, I mean I kind of got hidden there, but I mean with Beto's campaign on the mayoral, that became up as an issue, and then we put a statement out, and we got a lot of slack for it from folks that disagreeing with that, and had he been mayor at the time wouldn't have moved forward on that. So no, I think obviously it's a huge issue that pushes back on the notion about if you're really for affordable housing, are you going to support stuff like that?
County judge is the first position that Ron is running for that is a partisan position. He's running in the Democratic primary. City council and the mayor's seat are nonpartisan roles. He's always been kind of a well-known Democrat, but I think over time has kind of positioned himself maybe more of an independent. I'm curious how you would see kind of if he wins and would kind of be a Democratic county judge, how you would see that changing, if at all, how he would lead or the issues that he maybe would come out for.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely different because now that you're everyone knows where you're at. I mean, I will say this, if you recall during that race with Ivy, like he did a lot to try to make sure he was independent. That was the whole liberal Ron that came out. And it was like, well, I'm not going to say you're wrong there, but I'm also not going to like oppose it. And so I think he did put a lot of work and it worked well for him. But obviously when he was attempting to go to the administration, that changes the calculus and things. And so at this point, it's very widely known. I don't necessarily see it changing, though. I mean, at least in people's minds, it's, again, what everybody really knows. No one's ever considered Ron a conservative. And so it wouldn't be surprising to me if it stays the course in terms of him being judge.
Do you think he'd be more progressive? And I asked because I know that when he was campaigning, it was very much on climate initiatives, and that there were these kind of moments where he seemed slightly progressive, but then he would kind of walk it back. And so if that would give him, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's because of the position, though. The judge, like, I don't believe and you've talked about this, it's as easy as it is for mayor, because most of the stuff you're handcuffed by state law. And so, I mean, the judge talks about this a lot, right? Like, you can only do so much. And I do think he's right. I mean, there's the public perception piece, and you can go off and do that. And I think there's, I'm not as familiar with the judge. So I know with the mayors and local government, there's a U.S. Conference of Mayors and other initiatives that are led primarily by Democratic There's a governor's association. I'm not so sure on the judge if that's similar. So maybe he stamps it out for himself. But in terms of it changing how he governs or what he can actually do, I mean, the majority of the court is Democratic. So I mean, I think we've seen that already. I don't see him doing anything different though in terms of governance there.
Now, he had a moment in June 2020. It was right in the middle of the George Floyd protests, where a group of protesters were demanding a meeting with the city, and they had a list of demands, most of which kind of was about rooting out, ensuring that there was no racist ideology in the police ranks, and that the police department reflected the community it was policing, right? Nirenberg had this locally famous moment. He looked very mayoral in this moment. He went out, he met the protesters outside of City Hall, or maybe it was Municipal Plaza, and said, "Hold me accountable for these demands. I'm mayor of this goddamn city." As far as I could tell, nothing really happened, and he was not held accountable. Am I missing something? I mean, in other words, it looked like he might have completely meant it at the moment, but afterwards, nothing happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. And again, this goes back to managing expectations. There's nothing that you as a mayor could really do in that situation. Most of that's governed by state law or Supreme Court, right? Federal law. So I think, in the moment, I've been a part of campaigns where like things like that just happen. I can imagine his staff at the time when doing that is going back looking at like, well, how can we actually make this? And so it is again about perception, which I think often is.
Was he striking a pose? Was that it, or no?
Look, I think people get in the moment. Things happen, and for him, I think it did hurt with some of the local progressives, from what I would recall at the time hearing, and especially like young. I know Act for SA and others. I have friends over there who wanted to see a mayor do that and then come through with action. I think it could have been done differently. But in the moment, for whatever the reason was, he felt that was what he needed to do. And I'm sure, he intended on, but again, there's only so much you can do in that position. So, you're kind of stuck in this position where, you can only do so much. It's not about over promising or under delivering. It's just that you want folks to know like what your position is, knowing that I can't really do too much as mayor.
Yeah. Okay. We're entering the period in the interview where it's going to get really rough.
Yeah. I heard.
No. Like, I didn't tell you about this beforehand.
Okay.
This is going to be
good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you drive, Andrew?
God.
What do you drive?
I kind of thought this was going to come up.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, because I think you have an insider who knows what I drive.
I've seen you. You've passed me by on Broadway. I know what you drive.
Let me say this.
You're not going to say the word I. It starts with a T. Ends with an A.
No, look, I too drive a Tesla Model Y. Here's the difference, and I can show you. I bought that in 2022. Okay. So from y'all's reporting, I believe y'all have made a distinction, and I can tell you.
So you're saying your hands are clean.
I'm just saying.
Okay, well, hold on. Let's stop there because we're not done with you yet. But we had a story last week on Ron Nirenberg's Tesla. So he drives
it's a story heard around the world, apparently.
Right, yeah. So he drives a used Model Y, I believe. He purchased it last July because, hey, guess what? He didn't have his, he was out of office. He'd reached the end of his term limits.
He got it used from a family member.
Yeah. So he had no security driving him from place to place to place. And he had to buy his own car. So he bought a Tesla from, I think it was a family member, right? So this was after Elon Musk of Tesla, the CEO of Tesla, after he pours more than $200 million, it was closer to $300 million into the Donald Trump campaign for the White House in 2024, and after Doge. So Musk, of course, oversaw this massive cutting exercise of the federal government, just slashed tens of thousands of federal jobs. He became the villain, the absolute villain of the left, and Nirenberg buys a Tesla.
Look, all I can say
But not
is,
only that,
But, and I'm not actually saying like I think it's if you own a Tesla, cool, that's great. I'd love to own one myself. Maybe not. I don't know. But if you're going to say I'm so upset, I cannot believe what Elon Musk has done. I'm never going to buy a Tesla, and you don't own one. That's fine. If you say it and you own a Tesla, it's like you should probably keep that a little bit muted or sell your Tesla.
But then he also removed the Tesla logo
and that's the
and
thing,
put in a Toyota logo.
Look, it sounds like a business decision was made. But look, I'll give you this perspective.
Right.
If I was on a campaign and my principal, the elected or candidate I would have recommended against it.
So against putting a Toyota thing on your Tesla.
That, or if it was to the point where I was consulted on the vehicle purchase, I may have
Don't buy a Tesla.
Yeah, maybe not at this point. If you're running for office as a partisan, But it sounds to me like a business decision was made. And I will say this: I have looked at trying to sell mine. It's paid off, and because everyone, including myself, who dislikes Elon, the amount for the appreciation of the cars has dramatically dropped, and so like I would lose a lot of money.
Actually, after Doge really kicked in, and this would have been back in a year ago. April, May of 2025. Yeah, the used car market for Teslas was nuts. It increased by 1,000%.
Yeah.
So the value would have plummeted dramatically.
Yeah, yes.
Does this? It was interesting story.
Yeah.
It caught on. It pushed a lot of buttons, I guess, for some people, but. Does it matter at all? Like for the campaign, does any voter actually care about this?
I mean, I want to say no, but I think it does.
Really?
I mean, I don't know how much. I mean, listen, we can sit here and talk about accomplishments and policies all day. And at the end of the day, that has very little to move the needle on an electorate. Yeah. As we saw in the mayoral, as we've seen it at almost every level, we live in a world now where it's sound bites and what can get on TikTok and, who has the farthest reach on there. And so I think those stories do matter. I think it's more of cumulative. They add up. And so I don't know how much ultimately it's going to matter in this election, but it does matter more than I think people would think, because I would imagine if you went and talked to some of the Democratic groups and precinct chairs, like the folks who actually get out there and mobilize voters, if they get turned off because of that kind of stuff. And I've seen people with less, of an issue become bigger to where someone doesn't get support from someone and that trickles down. So, yeah.
Now, the second unfair question is I want you to, and this isn't really a question, I want you to go back to the year 2001, because that's when I moved to San Antonio. Yeah. And as I mentioned, the history of San Antonio starts in 2001 when I get here. And
I was a sophomore in high school. We're clear.
Bro, you've been in local politics a while, so you presumably know some history. I want you to rank San Antonio's mayors in terms of from the most consequential, however you define that, to the least consequential mayor. Go.
Jeez.
And don't spend a ton of time on each of them.
Yeah, let me ask you the worst question ever and breeze through it.
And keep it tight. I need to keep it concise.
Listen, here's what I'm going to say. I'm not going to do your top to bottom. I'm going to do on a continuum here. And look, seriously.
Well, a continuum is kind of top to bottom.
Yeah.
It's just
mine's left to right.
So.
It's fine. Mine's left to right. But listen, I think I can name things from each of these. The one I really started with, obviously,
is the most consequential.
Is not started with in terms of working at City Hall with Phil at that time. I think there were a lot of projects. That was back when 2-year terms. And so, there's some consequential projects for people during that time. Main Plaza, Phil Hardberger Park, there were things that got done. It was a different time. Julian, obviously, with Pre-K for SA, I was involved in that. Super consequential to this day. Ivy does.
Well, with Castro, how about a decade of downtown? Because that one, you can agree with it or you can disagree with the use of incentives. But I mean, I was thinking about Castro this morning, and I think I think you're right. Like he is up there, because of pre-K for SA, but also because of decade for downtown.
And also think about how much time he had because he left early. Like he got all that done in a really short amount of time. We got to remember these are two-year terms back then. That's crazy. And so the time that you had to get stuff done, the pressure was on. You have bonds, so there's a lot there. Ivy, SA Ready Tomorrow. I mean, that planning effort right now, like we still aren't seeing the entire, like all the fruits of that, but I think we will look back already in history and we had an opportunity. I think she was the first African-American female mayor of a city over 1 million, a master's degree, urban planner, like at a time when we really needed it. She was at the perfect place, perfect time. She got that done in a very short amount of time. And was able to get some other big projects. So I would include her there as well, obviously. I'm not as familiar with Ed as mayor. I'm more familiar with him as SAISD board member, Ed Garza. But I certainly know that he got a lot done during his time. And obviously, Ron, we talked about COVID, I think is ultimately what he's going to be known for. Whether you feel like he got something done or not, the citizens of this city for a year saw him sit down every night and comfort us, him and Judge Wolf at the time, through a really scary time, and was still able to achieve a lot given those circumstances.
Now, we didn't include Gina Ortiz Jones because it's kind of unfair. She's only been in office 8 months.
8 months.
And she's the first San Antonio mayor to have the new 4-year term. So it's pretty early, and it would, like I said, it would just be unfair. Now, as we speak, City Council is in an executive session closed to the public to decide whether to pursue a censure vote against the mayor. We have no idea how it's going to go, but I think anytime you have City Council considering a censure vote against a mayor, I think it's fair to say things could be going better for the mayor in her relationship with City Council. Now, she's 8 months in. What does this tell you about prospects for her first term? Yeah.
Look, it's going to be tough. We're saying this off air a little bit, but I mean, in terms of how I think about this, though, it is interesting that I think the dynamics are, it's like a paradigm shift. We're thinking about these through the lens of your typical 2-year terms, so I think that has a big difference on how long of a runway you have now. You're not having a campaign 6 months into your first term. So now that the mayor has that extra, runway to try to get her projects done, maybe the calculus, maybe we're looking at this wrong. Maybe it's not that, you need to just tally up the wins. And instead, try to set the groundwork. That's the only thing that I can say.
So what I hear you saying is, before when you had 2-year terms, you had to get a lot of things done in a very short period of time. As mayor, to do that, the only way that happened is if you were able to bring council along in a very short period of time, which means getting to know them, spending time with them, even if you don't like them, fake it until you like them. Or just fake it, period, like a lot of mayors have in the past. And now in her 4-year term, she's more relaxed, and she doesn't
I don't want to
make those relationships, because that also seems wrong to me. I mean,
I think my point in talking about the calculus here is that I think we've been so accustomed to seeing, as mayor, you come in, the first thing you have to do is count to 6, get those projects done, because within 6 months, you're now really starting to get a campaign in order, go raise funds, and then start campaigning again for your next time. And you got to show voters what I accomplished. I think this is a perfect storm, possibly, about this mayor having more time, but also just like what her priorities are. It's not a secret that other people have put on her aspirations to run for higher office. And if that's the case, if you look at it, and I'm not saying this is the case, but if you were to ask me and look at it through a lens of there is higher office that's partisan in the mayor's future, at what point in the future, we don't know. Is it before the 4 years or after? That's the $1 million question. I could say that in addition to trying to get some of that stuff done, if you can also put yourself in a position for Democratic voters later to say, hey, she may not have gotten that done at council, but she fought for us, right?
What would be those examples? Like if you've run some Democratic campaigns, what you would use so far that she's done that you think would play well with Democratic voters, even though when we look at it traditionally, it maybe was a failure in terms of her winning a vote.
Yeah, that's where it gets interesting to me, because I do see it as that there have been some opportunities missed, perhaps, if that were the case. Obviously, I saw that she just put out a statement this weekend with Congressman Castro, pushing back on the recent discovery about a San Antonio man who was killed by ICE officials or Border Patrol last year. And so things like that, I don't think we would have seen those in the past necessarily. I think the mayor's office has tried to, even when Julian was there, looking to go to the Obama administration, that was around HUD and housing. It was a lot different. You didn't see these types of overtures to the Democratic base. But then at the same time, there have been opportunities to push back on Abbott with some of the other stuff. And so I think the mayor is trying to be calculating there to see where she spends her political capital and where it's going to have the biggest bang for its buck. Again, I just don't think that that's necessarily going to be what we consider what we've been used to, grinding it out at City Hall to get your budget priorities through. I know she's worked with Councilman Galvan on some of the pre-K and childcare initiatives, but that's not what's getting the headlines because all the effort seems to be on the other side.
So are you saying that we're in a new phase where it's post results? A post-results period in our politics where you don't really have to get anything done at city council as long as you say the right things and you activate the base in just the way it wants to be activated.
Yeah,
is that what you're saying?
It just seems the results in terms of the budget and those things are going to happen regardless. Council really fights over kind of the crumbs anyway of the budget. So there are wins there that you can check off for re-election. But I'm talking about those signature items. Yeah. I don't know necessarily what they are. I know that the mayor had them on her campaign, and I don't know where she's at on some of those. But I can tell you that it seems like the wins that she has gotten are outside of the chambers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, what do you consider those wins? When you think, so we had, her speaking out, asking Congress to step in last weekend to investigate the San Antonio man's killing at the hands of ICE. What else? She was able to get her supporters and her base to support her in her questioning of Project Marvel in the arena. I'm just saying in terms of it may not have been successful in the chambers, but it certainly was successful in getting her base to support her. I would even venture to say the censure that's happening right now. I think in the report I saw from Molly and Megan, a lot of the people I've heard and seen of her supporters are doubling down saying, listen, this is just a witch hunt and you wouldn't be doing this if it were someone else. And so her base is still there. And so these things, again, there have been some cracks I've seen. I think the LGBT was one notable one, what happened. But even at the end of the day, the crosswalks, but crosswalks. Even then, I think I've seen the LGBT community, the majority of them rally behind her on the sidewalks. Right.
And some of the other initiatives.
That was an interesting case though, because it does seem that in some cases she's talking to the base and she's trying to keep them happy and on her side, totally engaged. When Greg Abbott says no rainbow crosswalk unless you want to put your state transportation dollars at risk, she says, okay, that's not a fight I want to have. Yeah. Right. And it did, it kind of roiled the LGBTQ community, a part of it, who wanted her to fight. They wanted to see their mayor kind of go to the mat on this. And
even on the ICE.
She did not do so.
Yeah, even on ICE, I think, that 8-hour meeting the other day, it seemed like, and I didn't attend, but I certainly heard from others, that there were a number of folks who showed up who were vocal supporters of her and were making claims of being disappointed in some of these lack of what they saw as fighting. So, I think, look, at the end of the day, I will say this. It's a lot different when you're campaigning versus when you're in office. Yeah. And so you can say a lot, but when you get in there and see the realities and the political realities, I know she got a lot of slack for, the funding and hey, that's a priority for the sidewalks or for the crosswalks. But again, it's perception and how you say these and how you communicate things and, managing expectations. I think there's different ways to do that. But again, I go back to a lot of those wins are coming outside of the chamber. Same thing with, her pushing on the actual bottom. Like there were supporters there rallying around saying, hey, the story that got buried here was that the mayor, is going to raise $500,000 in the LGBT community and she's going to save it. Again, that wasn't a win in the chambers. In fact, it led to the censure today. But for her base.
Do you think that's going to be a win for her base? Or are there going to be folks that say, you're really overstepping and why are you going to raise money for this one group but not these other ones?
Yeah. But that's besides the point. I think I've already seen, Greg Brockhouse bringing that up. And so, I know it's going to be an argument out there, but at the end of the day, for reelection, I've always said on a campaign, it's not what you're doing at that moment in time. It's about what you've already done and reminding your supporters. So if you can go to your supporters and say, hey, we may not have gotten all those wins, but remember, I went and fought for you and got those things done, even though we lost on council, then that's a win for her.
Yeah. Now, we should go into a little bit about what this potential censure vote is about, if it happens at all. And like I said, we do not know. They're deciding that right now. So the morning of the
February 5th.
Yeah, so they were going to talk about the Bonham Exchange, which is kind of the highest profile gay nightclub I can think of in San Antonio. It has been in violation of the city fire code for fire sprinklers for years. They had, this was a change in the fire code that I believe City Council approved in 2017. Gave nightclubs and bars and restaurants till 2023. The Bonham Exchange kind of blew through that deadline, and they still don't have fire sprinklers. And this is a very large nightclub. So City Council was going to vote on an agreement that would let the Bonham Exchange stay open in return for increased safety precautions and a schedule for installing. So District 1 Councilwoman Sukor, whose district the Bonham Exchange is in, she'd been talking with San Antonio Fire Department and the owners of the Bonham for months. She had a deal worked out. City Council was going to vote on it. The night before that vote, the mayor calls one of the co-owners of the exchange, kind of pressures her, as her attorney later told us. That's how he described it. Pressured her into accepting a deal that was very different from what Sukor had been working on. They had a one-on-one meeting during that city council meeting, Jones and Core, in which Jones is alleged to have just screamed and cursed at Sukor. That's what this is about. City council members, it was actually five women on city council several days after that, filed a memo calling for the censure vote. And they said this isn't the only instance of unprofessional behavior. Now, I don't know if you buy into what they've alleged or not, but how do you come back from allegations like that if you're the mayor?
Yeah. It's going to be tough. I mean, look, full disclosure, I was Councilwoman Core's first chief of staff, was there with her. I know what kind of leader she is, and I know this was important to her. I had talked with her since, obviously, and maintained a relationship and know that she had been working hard on this. I will also say I was there as chief of staff for Ana Sandoval at the last kind of issue that we had like this, where there was a censure that came of it. And I can tell you, and I'm not going to speak on anyone's behalf, but there are council members on that dais still, or council members who remember what that was like and where they didn't have a formal process. Right?
And this was the censure that happened of Mario Bravo in 2022 for conduct that they said was also inappropriate.
Yeah. I mean, similar in that vein, right? That there was conduct. And I remember how, it was traumatic for some of the council members and going through that. So I think they remember that. And now that there's a process, I think they want to see it through. And so, in terms of coming back, I mean, we've seen the mayor's comments, I think, so far. I don't necessarily see her changing on this. And again, I think for her, the calculus may be different. This is the way she is. This is how, I guess credit to her in terms of like, she is who she is. And you know that going in. And if you can't handle that, well, then that's on you. Yeah. And so there is something to be said, but again, it's certainly not going to help in terms of needing to get to your 6 votes. But again, is the calculus necessary that I need those 6 votes to achieve what I'm trying to achieve? I think that's what we're going to see.
By the way, and I'll try to make this the last question, last one or two. Okay, so I keep hearing about higher office or another office, so that she could be positioning herself. And you're not the only one saying this. What offices are we talking about? Because I don't see a congressional race in her future, not in the near term, or not in the next 2 years, or
are
we talking about her leaving office early?
Do you see her finishing her term, or do you see her bowing out?
I will tell you that there are avenues for that to be taken if she should choose. And here's what I would say. The Supreme Court, if you recall, on the latest redistricting efforts by Republicans, stayed. So those are in place now. But the promise was, well, we're going to come back and do this. So I think, and I've been in some of these conversations with some of these other districts where the expectation is, you run now, but this district is most likely going to change for 28, right? Which would be the next presidential. If you look at the 4-year terms, there is a difference there. There's a gap of about a year. If the mayor were to want to look at any of these seats that would have been changed, right, redistricted, the filing for that would be in December of 27, right? So that would be much sooner to make a decision. As we know, you can't also hold office while you've announced to run for another office. So anybody who would want to run on council for a congressional seat in a primary would have to announce by December of 27, much sooner than, running for reelection in November of 29. So sooner.
Yeah. So, and this truly is the last question. So if that's the case, and there's a congressional race in her future, the fact that she has been unable to get along with a big chunk of city council, does that just not matter to voters in a congressional race? I mean, it's not somebody, a Congress member is not somebody who, unless they have a very large committee, they don't have to worry about coming to consensus or building a coalition.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just is that a blip for her? The fact that she can't get along with?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the calculus. I mean, ultimately, I've worked on the congressional side. Those are just not the issues. Everything is so hyper partisan now. No. It's how many shots can you get at the other party? And, obviously I've worked for Democratic officials, and so everyone knows where I stand on that. But I mean, in a primary, when you're talking about your base of voters, and as we see now, and look at the numbers right now, I mean, if anything, this election in a week and a half or so, and then in November, looks like it's going to be a blue wave. And so it looks like what we're going to see is that's the type of campaigning that gets you rewarded, right? And so if you're talking about would what the mayor's done so far here be a blip for her only and not be consequential in a primary, in a congressional? No, I don't think it's consequential. I think voters are going to see a fighter, and they're going to see ads that have been clipped to show the time that she did stand up for them, and they're going to vote for her.
All right. Andrew Solano, thank you very much.
Thanks for all the easy questions.
We could end with this one.
Oh, God.
Who's going to win, Sakai or Nirenberg?
Oh, God. I honestly don't know. I don't.
You think it's a toss-up?
I think it's a toss-up.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Well, I'm not going to say. So,
thanks.
All right. Thanks a lot. Guys. And thank you for joining us. We will see you next week, and see you later. Bye.